Welcome back. In today's video I'm going to show you how I made this 360-degree camera rig, and if you want you could make one yourself. At the end of this video I'll also show you some really cool clips I was able to get with it. So let's get to it. So the wife had this old sewing machine that no longer worked, and no matter what she could do, she couldn't get it to work, but I figured I'd salvage out the motor for this, and it will work awesome for this project. It conveniently is variable speed, and it has a high and a low setting. Here's a switch that has the high and low on it. So I'm using scraps I had laying around for this project, and the first thing I'm doing is this, I think it's called Luan board. It's pretty much a 1/4-inch plywood. I'm going to attach this to my router, and I'm going to do this because of the fact that I'm going to use my router in order to make a circle. So after countersinking some holes, I take and I attach the Luan to my router, and then I router the hole through. I had to cut this Luan to length. So I marked the center of some 3/4-inch plywood that I'm going to use for the table. And after attaching it to a center pivot point, me and the wife took and did this together, and it is nice working with her because even though we can't hear each other, she knows exactly what to do, making sure that it's safe. You really got to take your time on something like this. We did a whole bunch of very shallow passes. And I gave the edges a little quick sanding. So we know where the center is for this. This didn't come with a center. So what I'm going to do, put it on a piece of paper, trace it, I'll look for my scissors for a half hour.
One eternity later.
They were on the table the whole time.
Now this is a Lazy Susan bearing, and it didn't come with a template in order to figure out where the center is. So what I did is I traced it out on a piece of paper, cut that out, and then after folding it in half, I can figure out where the center is. Here in the top I'm drilling a hole, and this is so we can reach the screws for the other side. Now I just secure that down with 4 screws. And I secured that down to another piece of plywood. I needed to be able to put a belt around this whole thing, so I used the Dremel and just rotated it. And I tried a couple different bits to see what would work. Now for a belt, what I ended up using is this flexible filament for a 3D printer, and I melted the ends together and just stuck them together. This worked excellent. However, if you didn't have that, you could just take and link together a bunch of rubber bands, and then when you get to the end you could just tie it together with string or a wire. So now I'm going to mount the motor on this block. I did end up moving the motor out further later so it would give a little more room for a camera swinging around. And here's where I ended up putting the motor. So I really didn't like the idea of using this foot controller, so I wanted to make it into something that I could control a little better. So after seeing how it works, taking it all apart, I decided I was going to take and mount it in this box and make it where I could adjust it with a screw. So I drilled a larger hole, and that's going to be for a nut to be stuck into, and then a smaller one for the screw to go all the way through. So then I just hammered the nut into place, and that's going to secure it really well. To make the screw, I put this wing nut on a very long screw, and then I threaded a lock nut all the way down and tight. I could have eliminated this little power distribution box which separates the motor and a light, but I thought it might come in handy later, so I figured I'd keep it. After screwing it down, I just took and threw some zip ties on to clean up the wires a little bit. Then I added a couple screws to this box that controls the motor. And I trimmed the wires down and put them in place. For the high-low, I just mounted this right by the motor. I didn't want to put too much effort into this as it doesn't really need it. Now if you notice the part that adjusts in order to control the speed is actually part of the live circuit, so I put this block in to make sure that it is isolated from the screw. And then I ran a screw in the side so it had a little bit of a pivot point. With that done, I can give it a little bit of a test. And this thing does get up to some terrifying speed. So with a scrap piece of Luan, I covered the top up, and that'll keep fingers from getting into the live wires. Now the best way I could figure out to get the center point was to use a marker and have it spinning. Then I'm going to drill that out with a 3/4 inch bit. So I approximately measured out 4 lines, and this is so that way I can put some magnets down, and you'll see what that's for in a minute. So now with a block of wood and this little itty bitty hammer, I'm able to take and put the magnets in there, and that's so it can hold this paper down, and I can switch it out if I'd like. Now the thing you see me putting in the center is actually a flywheel from a treadmill, but you could use just about anything else that needs to be as something that can hold an object in the center. So as you may have seen in a previous video, I primarily made this so I can showcase some of the stuff that I made, but when it's turned up, it can make some really cool slow motion shots, which I'll show you in a minute. So there you have it, but as I promised, here's some really cool shots I was able to get with some water. Thank you for sticking around, and check the channel out, see if there's something else you like. Have a good one.